community so we can see what kind of cool things are going on here. They have 6 minutes each to present, then there's 20 minutes of Q&A from the audience, from you guys. That's the really important part. Because that's your opportunity to give them feedback, give them help, make suggestions, ask questions, make connections. You know, you guys all have your own networks, and startups need connections. So keep that in mind when they're presenting, and think about how you can help. Each of them will be asked at the end how we as a group can collectively help them, and that's your time to shine. We appreciate that. We also appreciate Kawa Coffee, who generously donates this mana. They're on vacation or scouting new locations or something like that, but they're here with us in spirit and in liquid form. We have 2 awesome presentations today. Our first presentation, Mr. David Chittister, he was one of our first presenters here. He has a really cool local crowdfunding platform that has been very successful over the last 6 months. He's going to tell us a little bit about those successes, not the least of which being that all of the folks you guys have funded are Million Cups presenters so far. Pretty good stuff. David, please.
Thanks, John. As John said, about 6 months or 8 months ago, I was here to talk about Florida Funders. Florida Funders is an online venture capital company. And what we do, we're a typical venture capital company, forms a fund, finds investors to put the money into the fund, and then looks for companies to invest in. We do that, but we do it on the internet, and we do it in reverse. We find the companies first that are looking for funding. We list them on our website. We find accredited investors, and those accredited investors then can self-certify on the site that they're accredited investors, and then they can see the offering of the company. If there's enough interest in the company, the investors put their money into escrow, and when we break escrow, we form a fund. The final thing we do is form a fund. But it's a sole purpose fund. The fund only invests in the single company that the investors are interested in investing in. And here's how it works, and I won't go through this, I went through it last time, but in the question and answer, I'll be using this as yes, your questions as we go along. So where do we stand right now? When I first presented, if you looked at the Million Cups website, and it said Florida Funders website coming soon. We didn't even have our website up. Today, I can stand here and say this week we funded our first company. SavvyCard, company many of you know here in St. Petersburg, we formed our first fund, and we pulled together 9 investors and formed a fund and signed papers Monday morning, and we have our first portfolio company. So we've gone all the way from not even having a website to not only launching, finding companies to get funded, they're looking for funding, sign up accredited investors, but actually getting enough accredited investors, and in that case it was 9 accredited investors that we pulled together into one fund and funded SavvyCard for a tune of about $80,000. So the beauty of that is that the fact that SavvyCard, minimum investment in SavvyCard was $50,000. Well, we found 9 people who wanted to invest but didn't want to put $50,000 in, so they put as little as $5,000. We pooled all those $5,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 into one fund, $80-some-thousand, and now we became an investor in SavvyCard. Interesting story. When I first came out, in fact, before I even talked last time here at 1 Million Cups, I was going around meeting people in the community talking about this concept that I had. And I stole the concept. It's not new. They're doing it in California. Funders Club and AngelList started this in March of last year. So I went to my attorney with a business plan of Funders Club and AngelList and said, why can't we do this in Florida? What's stopping us? And we, after quite a bit of research and analysis, we figured we could do it, and we have done it. So in that time frame, when I was thinking of the concept, and I had developed a diagram similar to this, actually probably very close to this, and I was going around meeting with people and said, why can't we do this? What's the problems? Who's on board? What can we do? And I met with David Etheridge. He was one of the first guys I met with at SavvyCard. And I explained the process like this, and I said, the companies are over here, and the investors are over here, and the Florida Funders are here, and we bring them together, and then we form a fund, and the fund invests. He took a marker out, and over Company A, he wrote SavvyCard. And here we are 6 months later, and they are Company A, and we actually did our first investment for SavvyCard. So we have 4 other companies listed right now at this point for funding. 3 of those companies were presenters here, as was SavvyCard at the 1 Million Cups. We're swamped with companies right now. We have well over 100 companies that are in some form of the application process. Some of them are here. So I see some of you here. I'm way behind in analyzing companies and looking at the submittals that we have. I've talked to another 50 or more companies who have asked me, should they submit, here's my business plan, let's meet, let's talk about what we submit. We have lots and lots of companies. It's a matter of sorting them all out and finding the best companies for the investors and finding the investors to look at those companies and invest. So I wanted to be really short on the presentation because there's typically a whole lot of questions every time I talk. And not just talking about Florida Funders, but about crowdfunding or anything that. If you have any questions on anything dealing with crowdfunding, technically we're not crowdfunding. If you're familiar with the Jobs Act, Title III of the Jobs Act is called crowdfunding, and that's why there's a lot of confusion out there. That allows non-accredited investors to invest in companies. We are basically accredited investors only, so we are not really crowdfunding according to Title III of the Jobs Act. Technically, though, basically, we're pulling a lot of people into one thing to fund. That's what crowdfunding is. So basically, you can call it crowdfunding for accredited investors, but when I say that, people go like, well, that's not legal. Well, it is legal, but so we don't call it crowdfunding, we call it online venture capital. But if you have any questions on crowdfunding or even non-equity crowdfunding, Kickstarter or Indiegogo, I pretty much have covered a lot of that in my research in the past year. I've talked all over the country or all over the state on crowdfunding and what we're doing. So I'm going to end it with that and start to answer questions. If anybody has questions, yes, sir.
Well, how do you find your investors and their capacity? And two, what do you think the limit would be? How high do you think you can go for a fund?
The question is, how do we find our investors and how high can we go on for a fund? I'll answer the second question first. We'd like to look at a $200,000 to $500,000 range for a fund. We could go much higher if we had the accredited investors that were interested. In California, we're patterning everything again after Funders Club. Funders Club, in a year and a half, has invested in 60 companies, and the investors put in a total of $12 million. That's $200,000 average each. So we're in that range. We can go higher if we had the accredited investors. Where do we get the accredited investors? That's where we stand right now. That's where I need help from everyone here. If you know accredited investors, if you are accredited investors, put the word out. We need accredited investors to come and look at these deals. People who are interested in looking. I'm speaking all over the state. I'm talking at the Thai convention or the Thai meeting next 2 weeks from now up in Tampa. I was at Rollins College. I was at USF. Basically, word of mouth. We are talking now about trying to get SEO. We haven't done any SEO yet. We haven't done any pay-per-click. So we're talking to firms about SEO, pay-per-click, and how to get those accredited investors. They're telling me Facebook is actually fairly good. You can narrow down which groups, people in Facebook. If they're following Lexus of Tampa Bay on Facebook, they're probably an accredited investor. Things like that. So that's what we're trying to do now, is build up this accredited investor list. Yes, sir.
Can you explain how the carried interest works?
Yes. Can you explain how the carried interest works? Yeah, we make no money in doing this. We don't charge for, we as Florida Funders don't charge for any of this. Now there is a reserve that's put aside from the investors to pay the expense of the fund, but we don't get any of that. We only make money on carried interest. And carried interest basically is this line here that comes back to us. In this fund, say, I'll use SavvyCard as an example. Here's SavvyCard. We formed a fund. It's $80,000 invested in SavvyCard. 2 years from now, 3 years, whenever, SavvyCard is wildly successful, and they have a buyout offer or a merger offer or something, and this fund is now worth $1 million instead of $80,000. First thing that happens, when this $1 million comes back to the fund, the first $80,000 goes back to the investors. They're the preferred. They get their investment back. That leaves $920,000 left as profit for the fund. We share in that profit. We get 20% of the increase in value. That's carried interest. So we get a share of the profit in the fund. If there is no profit in the fund, we don't make anything. So we don't make any money by getting a company funded. If SavvyCard is mildly successful, and this fund is never worth more than $80,000, we make nothing. Maybe the investors get their money back, but we don't make anything. So we have to find companies that are going to be successful if we're going to be successful. So we're on the same boat as the companies. We're basically relying on the companies to be successful. Yes,
I attended your first presentation, and at the time you had mentioned that you didn't want to go into real estate crowdfunding yet. Is this still the case? I'm asking this question because I work for a nonprofit organization that would want to do this, and it would start with a small project, with not a whole lot of capital involved. And I would be interested in knowing if this is something that in the future you want to do, maybe similar to a REIT type.
The question is on real estate, whether this is feasible for real estate. It is feasible for real estate, but we're not, as Florida funders, we're not planning to go into the real estate market. There are crowdfunding companies out there that are specifically geared toward real estate, much more expertise and knowledge than we have. So we don't plan to go into real estate. It's being done very successfully. This exact same model is being applied to real estate very successfully. There's a company in South Florida that is doing what we're doing and doing real estate as well. So there are other companies. We don't plan to go into real estate. Yes, sir.
All right, well, I just finished my 506 offering, so I'll be going in tranches. I'll have one tranche, then a second tranche, and a third tranche. I'll be able to handle the second and third very easily because of what I'm doing. My question is, if I use your platform to raise $250,000, of course, I need to use that money to get going. How, in my second and third tranches, do I, if I don't need your platform to raise it, because I've already proven my company and my model, and then I have the accredited investors from around the U.S. and the world looking at it, how does that play into your 20%?
So the question was, if there's different tranches on a Rig D offering, and the first tranche is done through us, what happens with the second and third tranches? We're completely independent of any other fundraising or equity going. In fact, we can be, first, again, I use Savvy for example. They raised $500,000. We only had a portion of that. So we're not exclusive. Somebody signs up with us. It's not, we're going to raise all the money. We might raise a part of it. It might be independent. You might do the first 200 with us. You might do 50 or 100,000 the first 200 with us, and have another investor put in 100,000, and then go to the second, third. So we're completely independent. There's no requirement to use us exclusively or any different than any other investors coming in. We become just another investor in the process. Yes, sir, back.
Two-part question. What's your value proposition in respect to the investors, and how do you protect yourself from them bypassing you if you're making this information available to them?
Yeah, the question is, how do we bypass them from, how do we prevent them from bypassing us, and how do we, first part of the question?
Your value proposition to the investor.
The investors, okay. Start again with the second part. We are trusting the investors are not going to go around this. Our attorney says we probably need to have a legal document that anybody signs up on the site says they won't do that. Right now, I say, you know, we're talking one-on-one with a lot of these people, and yes, they could bypass us right now and say, oh, I got this information, I'm going to go right to this company and bypass and not get this 20% carry. Investors can do that. We're hoping that they don't. We will know if they do, because companies would say, oh, this guy came to us, you know. So we're hoping that doesn't happen. We are open. We have that risk right now. The other part of the question, Sean, disappeared. Did I touch it?
We're not so savvy.
There we go. Wow.
We just have to adjust around the ears.
Our pitch to investors is three things. First of all, most investors, go back to the stats. I'm an engineer, so I always do numbers. There's about 500,000 accredited investors in the state of Florida, at least 500,000. Only 3% typically invest in private companies. At least 485,000 investors. Why don't they invest? Three reasons. One, they don't know how to find the deals. Number two, they don't have a way to invest. If they had a deal, they'd have to hire an attorney and do due diligence and do a lot of things. And number three, there's a minimum investment, typically in a company like Savvycard, $50,000. So our proposition, we solve all those problems. You can invest as little as $5,000. We find the companies for you and analyze the companies, and we have the platform. You can do everything on the internet. You just go in, you put your numbers in, you say I want to invest, boom, we transfer the money, we produce the documents, we sign everything through EchoSign. It's all electronic, it's all done. So we have a platform, We have we find companies and we bypass that minimum investment amount. We also say to these investors, there's no cost to an investor to sign up, unlike an angel group or some other group. There's no cost to sign up. There's no obligation to ever invest. You don't have to invest in anything. And number three, you remain anonymous to these companies. These companies can't see who's looking at them. So you, as an investor, aren't going to get a call from company B saying, hey, I saw you were looking at us on here. Can I come over and make a presentation? So unless the investor is interested and puts money in escrow and starts following the company, the investors don't even know. Companies don't even know the investors. So that's our proposition to the investors. Yes, sir.
Two-part question. One, who is the investment committee that evaluates these companies and decides of the 50, SavvyCard is the best? And then the second part is, how do the individual investors, how does the process work for them to make a decision on a approved deal by approved deal basis to invest in one of those? And maybe thirdly, if your investment committee declines an investment in, say you have made a decision not to invest in SavvyCard, do your investors still have a chance, if they like the company, to go forward themselves?
Okay, first question. The investment committee right now is a committee of one. It works like this, and again, we're really informal. This is an MVP, we're still an MVP. We're still trying to figure out how the best way to do this. First thing is I review the submittals. I might meet with the submitter and talk and try to figure out what, and I might refer that to some other people. If it gets to the next step, I can send it to my partners, two partners, who review it, and then we have comments back, and we decide where to go from there. Then we will typically meet with the company and decide whether we proceed. We are in the process now of bringing on board some smart money investment in Florida Funders itself to broaden our capabilities. We're fairly limited right now. We're bringing people that have expertise in the medical field, people that have expertise in investments, and other things that we don't. So we have a much broader base of principles here to help out with that process. The second part of the question is if the investors, these investors, if we don't put a company up here, the investors don't see them at all. So they don't even know that we're talking to a
So
company.
it first has to pass your investment committee, and then it gets presented.
Yes.
Is that right?
Right. Yes. Yes, sir.
I started an adult medical daycare center, and I'm just wondering, is that, something that your company looks at, healthcare, or are you just pretty much limited to technology?
We're getting a lot of submittals in healthcare. We don't have the expertise right now. And like I said, we're bringing on some people in the next few weeks that could help us in that area. But our background is technology, basically. I started technology companies, my partners did. So we know technology, we know finance a little bit, but healthcare right now is going to take us a few weeks as we work on the details on this. Yes, ma'am.
David, I used to work in DC up in Boston, and there the ratio it seemed like was 100 plus startups to the available capital. So you're tripping on them when you walk out the door. So here, when we talk to startups, we hear a lot, oh, we can't find the capital when we're here. And when we talk to investors, they say, oh, we don't find the startups when we're just in here. So what have you found in terms of the types of applications you're receiving? Is it that you're not meeting the caliber that you're necessarily looking for? Is it that the investors in the area aren't well organized into funds like this?
Yeah. I think the issue is the investors that we're, at least so far, finding would like to see companies that are generating revenue. And so we're getting a lot of early stage companies with just an idea or pre-revenue. And we're not finding a lot of interest in those companies from the investors that have signed up with us. So we need to, I think, like SavvyCard, again, it's generating revenue, so investors were interested. We have another company that's generating revenue. People are starting to take interest in that. So we're kind of finding the later stage companies, they're still startups, but if they're generating revenue, they have a lot better chance to get funding or even get listed with us. We hope to expand to some point where we can start to fund even earlier stage companies. But right now, we're having a little, the issues with the investors looking for, if they can only invest in 3 companies out of 30 we have listed, they're going to pick 3 that have revenue.
What is the investment format? I'm interested. Are these all equity positions? Are there any long-term just loans or investments with balloon buyouts?
Yeah. The question is, what is the investment vehicle? There are 2 basic things. One is equity, straight equity. Again, SavvyCard had a great deal offering out there. They're selling stock. We become an investor, we buy stock, we own a certain percent of the stock in SavvyCard. Carvoyant is also listed with us. They have a convertible note listed where they said they're looking for $300,000 and it's going to pay 8% accrued and it's going to be convertible at 20% discount of what their Series A round is going to be in the near future. So when we get a Series A, whoever invests in a convertible note would convert, not cash-wise, but would convert stock-wise at a 20% discount plus the approved interest.
So the offering is based on the needs of the type of company.
It's the company's offering. We don't do loans, we don't do straight loans. There are companies that do that, such as, I'll speak in a second, but they've done over $4 billion in loans. That's strictly different thing.
So do you set the Florida founders set the valuation on the company?
The Florida funders set the valuation of the company. It's, again, A to Z. SavvyCard had their valuation. They said, this is what it is, we're selling stock. We have another company out there that has no valuation. We want to raise money. If we take them on to, okay, here's the terms and conditions. We'll raise this amount of money. We want a board seat and this much equity and whatever. So it can be, depends on the company and the state of the company. Chris?
So outside of the 20%, there's no annual management fee for the investment, right?
There's no annual management fee, but as I said, outside the 20% that we get here, the investors put their money into escrow. When we break escrow, 93% of that goes to the company. Say 100% goes over here, and then 93% goes in here, 7% stays in the LLC. That 7% pays for third-party expenses, legal and accounting, from the LLC, nothing to Florida funders. It gets paid out. If there's any left at the end of the fund, it gets refunded back to the investors. So there's no 2% management fee like a typical VC that we would get annually. But there is that 7% that stays there unless it's used up, until it's used up. Yes, sir.
What's the average processing time when once a startup comes to you and funds are provided?
SavvyCard took 3 months, but we had a lot of bumps. It was from our first investment until closing was 3 months. And we had a lot of issues with the actual escrow transfer thing. That cost us about a month or so, back and forth, maybe 3 weeks or so. So if that's any example, it could be quicker, it could be longer. We have the ability on there that the company says how long they want to keep the fund open for, and we say 90 days, 120, 360, I think 270 is the longest we put up there. So again, it's up to the company what they think, how long they're going to need. Yes.
What's the average sort of rate of return? I don't mean like for each individual company, but if you've got other companies out there, some going to be.
Excellent question. What's the average rate of return? Funders Club did an analysis of their investments over the first year and a half of their investments. As I said, they invested in a year and a half, $12 million into 60 companies. They did an analysis of their unrealized rate of return based on the follow-on funding that those companies got, based on the valuation after companies were funded, after they invested in them, and their unrealized rate of return was about 45%. So they basically said if we had liquidated when the company started follow-on funding, we would have a 45% return. And basically they wrote off anything that was not had follow-on funding. Yes.
So SavvyCard asked for $50,000 for maybe 20% equity. Now they got $80,000. Where does that extra $30,000 go? Do they give more equity for that?
No, they actually raised over $1 million. Between other sources and us, they raised over $1 million. So they basically said, we're going to raise $1 million. Well, it turned out they raised, say, $1.2 million. And I'm throwing out, I'm just example here, I'm not sure what the exact numbers are. But say they raised $1.2 million. They are selling more stock than they originally wanted to sell. They said, we'll do that. But we would like to get that extra money now. So they're giving up more equity than they originally planned. Any other questions? One more.
Once you take the company in and they're moving along, do you provide any kind of advice to make sure that they are successful?
Once we take a company in, do we provide any advice? Not if I can help it. No, I personally, no. We have other, like lands and people that like to do that stuff. And I'll give you another example, a company in Longwood. We would have an agreement with them that if we do the funding for them, we would probably want a board seat want to have a say so. With Savvy Card, no, we're just an investor, a passive investor funding a Savvy Card. So again, depends on the company, depends on the arrangement,
Case by case.
case by case. Okay, one more question?
What type of growth revenue did Savvy Card have to raise that million?
I'm not sure. Yeah, probably Dave has to respond to that.
Okay.
So David, how can we as a community help you grow further, find new companies?
We are really looking to get these investors involved in the companies. If you're a credit investor is somebody that has a net worth of $1 million or more, not counting their personal residence, or makes $200,000 a year for the past 2 years, or $300,000 husband and wife. If you're a credit investor or you know credit investors that fit in that category, have them sign up. It's free. It takes about 2 minutes to sign up. You put in your email address and the password. I think it's about it. And then they have access to see this information. No obligation to invest. Everything's anonymous. So